G'day friends and fans. Welcome to Dave Talks Off Ukraine War Update for the 16th of November 2025. Yet again, I'm the bearer of bad news. But has that not been the case now for over a year since the fall of Bakhmut? There has been few, but even those few successes Ukraine has had are short-lived. If it wasn't for the creeping molasses of the Russian war machine, this war might have been over, but with much higher casualties on both sides, and Putin's public directive has been to minimize casualties. I say public directive because they are matter of public record. I know a lot of people don't like being reminded of this, nor do most people seem to appreciate the truth anymore. I will not bow to the whims of those who cannot handle bad news. Clearly, they just want to watch whatever tickles their psychotic, sociopathic tendencies, sit there hoping beyond hope that if you fake it till you make it, you too will succeed like China. Oh no, China's economy has been set back 20 years and looks like falling into the dark ages. And trust me, they will not take bad news very well. But again, Chinese don't like bad news. South Korea doesn't like bad news. A lot of countries have to face head-on bad news. Philippines has a lot on its plate too. A lot of places have potential and growing potential for conflicts. Sorry. I had an urge to sneeze right then. I thought I got all the sneezes and coughs out of the way before I started. I don't want to restart. I've done a number of restarts. I don't want to risk getting hoarse halfway through again and then having to take a break to recover. Okay, Ukraine has a history of corruption. We know this. We know Ukraine has been battered by bombings in the last couple of days and is now scarred by corruption. Bags of gold and cash have been confirmed, found in a toilet. Zelensky was named on tape. We have a lot of bad news. Some of it is making it to the BBC, but as a positive, where they're trying to put a positive spin on Zelensky fighting corruption. It's his best buddy. These guys go back years. Don't tell me that when Zelensky's name come up and talking about money laundering, they weren't literally asking Zelensky's. We know Zelensky's aide was in the room. They're talking to someone who doesn't reply. Someone who knows they're being recorded by the SBU. And is reporting back to Zelensky. We know that when Zelensky heard the FBI was coming, he called his friend and tipped him off, and his friend somehow made it out of Ukraine, despite all the security. Now, not everybody's escaped this corruption scandal. There have been arrests. But again, Zelensky's tarnished. Macron is tarnished. Keir Starmer is tarnished. It is no coincidence that Macron's government is unstable. The foreigners vote for Macron because he'll let in more foreigners. The French vote for the National Front because they'll try to stop the foreigners. And the lunatic fringe vote for the lunatic fringe party because they hate everybody, even themselves. Keir Starmer's now facing a rebellion of people he's kicked out in the past. Kicked back to the backbenchers. They're claiming they're not corrupt but set up. Now this could be explosive on multiple fronts if it wasn't for the fact that the system itself is on the left side. They're on Zelensky's side. They're on Starmer's. They're on Macron's side to an extent, but it's crumbling. Now Macron, and that, while they're irrelevant right now, may make a comeback. You will notice that Zelensky yesterday pivoted to Germany to kiss their little hiney for 400 million, and then it has pivoted today to Greece for a different reason. But Ukraine is shattered, with half their power facilities allegedly down. Well, it doesn't look like it, but my guess is that we're not seeing the parts that are barely lit up, and parts of Kiev yesterday were blackened while the rest was lit. So it's not like they don't know. And this is a danger when they're settling into a pattern. See, Ukraine's settling into a pattern. They know they're going to hit Dnipro, they're going to hit Sumy, they're going to hit parts of Kiev, they're going to hit parts of western Ukraine. And they seem now to accept it. They get hit, they rebuild it. But the mainstream media reporting on Zelensky's corruption is nothing new. But the fact is, often a lot of the stories I bring you from the Russian media are merely repeats of what's in Politico behind paywalls or Wall Street Journal behind paywalls. But people just seem to not want the truth. But I'm going to speak it anyway. The New York Times, hidden behind a paywall. Now, even if I log in for the free account, I'll get a few seconds to look at this story, then it'll disappear. And there's not much behind it, okay? The speculation is that the revelations are a remarkable reversal. Who once presented himself as a leader who'd clean up the country's politics, the New York Times is admitting that Zelensky's a liar and is corrupt, and there may be no coming back from this. But they're hiding it behind a paywall for 50 cents a week. And seriously, I could be bringing you the better stories if I had income. And I hate the fact that so many people expect me to make income from advertising when they won't even subscribe. Don't they know YouTube has rules? If so many people don't subscribe and people cut out at the watch time less than 5 minutes, so that kills that watch. You don't get counted. And now they're talking about getting rid of the subscriber count. You know how they got rid of the thumbs down count? Now they want to get rid of channel subscriber counts. Well, that's weird. But how are we going to know if we hit benchmarks? Well, that might be hidden from the public view, just like downvotes are actually still available for the private viewing of the channel. But yeah. But someone said that they looked up themselves up on one of these social network metric sites, and they laughed and they said, "That's not my metrics. That's way over my metrics. Either YouTube's cheating me or they're cheating me." But it turns out that a lot of channels are being either under or over-reported. That there's YouTube behind the scenes. YouTube has problems that they can't seem to fix. But I get more subscribers and views on other channels. I'm not just on YouTube. But most of my comments are coming on YouTube, and YouTube is blocking almost all of them. Very few comments get through, and actually a lot of them I don't even see. I just see comment deleted. I get notification, I go to look at the comments, and it's not there. Now, this crisis is about kickbacks from projects to defend energy plants in wartime. These are European companies, some of the biggest companies in Europe, who are paying Zelensky money, allegedly, a group of Zelensky's friends, allegedly, for defense contracts. So Ukraine isn't getting the best defense. And these are not going through independent bidding. This is clearly an indication why Zelensky went after the independent anti-corruption agencies back in July. The mass protests that were on the 25th were dwarfed by protests yesterday and early today, but those were broken up by the Ukrainians as being undermining the war effort, and most of the media has rejected that. But Zelensky's close aides have times tried to neuter independent anti-corruption agencies who are probing the inner circle, abandons attempts after mass protests. Investigators this week released a treasure trove of evidence, including damned claims against senior figures. And again, these are about defending Russian missile attacks. Now, this is tied directly to the UK government and the French. See, France, and this is what I asked yesterday, isn't it? What happened to all those IRIS-Ts? What about, they were replaced by older defense systems. Some of them from France that were, from NATO, and UK with their anti-drone drones. This revelation means that Ukraine hasn't been adequately defended because of Zelensky. I'm vindicated. I have told you for over a year now that Zelensky is Russia's best friend, that his inadequate efforts are helping the Russians, and that if air defenses in Ukraine were better, if the tanks and artillery were better positioned and commanded by the people that were actually trained to command them and not handed over to Zelensky's Azov battalion, who have their own YouTube channel and have 160,000 subscribers. So much for fighting. This is ridiculous. The very corrupt people are being rewarded. The Ukrainian president has demanded the resignations of the Justice Minister and the Energy Minister. They were subsequently removed by the National Security Council. He imposed sanctions on Timur Milic, a friend and former business partner, who only became a former business partner when Zelensky decided that he was a former business partner 5 seconds after he found out that the laundry room was exposed. And this is what Timur did. He ran the laundry room for the Ukrainian government. Millions in illicit funds laundered through housing projects in other countries, such as a mansion under Zelensky's name in Italy. They were marked off as rent and getting millions in rental income. Now there is over 5 arrests, millions confiscated, but as you know, while the Democrats in America want to go after Trump, they're ignoring the real deal, the real corruption in Ukraine. But of course, they pivot, like they always do, to Russia, Russia, Russia. And just look at what a bold-faced liar he is. But as you can see, this is a pro-Ukrainian site. This is a Ukrainian map, not a Russian map. Not a iota of good news. Again, parts of Ukraine hit, losing power. Again, Sumy is hit. Again, Kharkiv. Again, fighting on the buffer zone. although there's no results. Fighting in Kupiansk has released no results. But remember, they fought for weeks. The Ukrainians pushed them back, said they're on the verge of victory, and then a week later, their lines collapsed. Will Ukraine be able to get a counteroffensive? Maybe, but they'll lose another 1,000 men doing it, and a week later they'll be back where they were. There does not seem to be good news for Ukraine. But there might be some. If they, in other parts of Ukraine, if they continue to hold the Russians back, they may eventually be able to get a ceasefire on the front line. But it does rely on them not doing anything foolhardy, like trying a massive offensive to push them back, because that's when they awaken the ire of the Russians. Right now, Ukraine is taunting the Russians for not putting up a good fight. Don't be fucking fools. Accept the fact that half the Russian army isn't going to be fighting through the winter and only sitting in the trenches. Most of you should be proud that the Ukraine, instead, people just want to yell about Russia but here it is, a little bit of territory gained. That's now the Russians don't control all of this yet, but they control a lot more of it. As you can see, it's only doesn't look like much, but they have made small gains here. Now, fighting is intensified. But again, it's sporadic because it's only a few hours a day. But the Russians are cut off this part from Murad, though the Ukrainians are going around. They're running into the Russians here in Rhine as they try to reinforce and push the Russians back. They need to retake this junction to break the Russians' hold on Posk. I know it's not called Posk, and I know that's not Myro. And yes, there's still fighting down here. And again, the Ukrainians shouldn't be taunting the Russians because Putin, well known, can drop another 160,000 on them and pretty much annihilate, right? And he would not lose a wink of sleep doing that. He has just stated his preference that this be a slow grind to a Russian victory, either when Ukraine decides to capitulate the claimed territories. He's made it clear in a public statement, by the way, there's still a chance that if they relinquish Donetsk, that they can keep the other territories. But Ukraine just will not accept loss. Ukraine will not accept defeat. Ukraine seems to hold on that they can gain a, miracle. We've heard this one before, haven't we, Adolf? That Steiner, where's Steiner? Steiner surrendered to the Americans 6 weeks ago. Now, I do suspect the Russians are getting help from within Ukraine, just like the Americans, and then again, in most wars, Alexander had a Persian general. North Korea started off well because they had so many infiltrated in the south. Same with the Russian revolutions. Communists had infiltrated most of the upper government in the guise of liberal academics. Ukraine, same thing. Ukrainian academics. So, don't I'm under no illusion that there is a Ukrainian somewhere who has provided a ton of information to the Russians. Obviously, what preparations they've had made up until his defection or while he was, we're never going to know. I think it's not going to be like World War II, maybe. But then again, there's always the possibility, but may not be in our lifetime, when we find out that some of, although a lot of people don't want to believe this, but some of Adolf's cabinet were working against him, including his own oil minister, was feeding information to the Allies through Switzerland. You always want to think, your side got a clean victory. I don't think there's ever such thing as a clean war. I actually wrote in my book, the only fair fight is when both sides lose, and this is perhaps relevant in Ukraine in that I think it's best that both sides lose. I think it's best that Ukraine lose its Russian population to these territories because they were there first. Okay, you may not want to like this information, but most Ukrainians come down either from Belarus or from Poland or up from Romania. They're a Slavic mix, and those Slavs originally were pushed. This was originally Germanic up until Kaliningrad. The Slavs were pushed through by the Mongols. Although there were, up until Slovakia, but yeah, they pushed up and they pushed through, increasing in numbers. People want to believe out of Africa when it's been completely debunked. I've had multiple academics tell me that they can't explain without they can't explain humanity without multiple spawn points. And that even some Native Americans may be related to Siberians, but those could also be Siberians who crossed over, because there's also bones from Indians older than that. And how do you explain South Americans moving up if they didn't spawn? Then, of course, they tried the ocean crossing theory, but the problem is the currents will go in the other direction, and there's no boats or anything to indicate that they made the crossing. And then again, genetics doesn't match their theories either. Same with out of Africa. Genetics proves that doesn't work. Getting off track. We want best outcomes here. To be fair, if you're really, we should always want the best outcomes. And the best outcome right now is a freezed front. Both sides take the L and walk away with what they've got. And Zelensky might actually be able to salvage what's left of his presidency and retire. But this is the problem. The human ego, when you get away with something, you think you can keep getting away with something. Now, it's like trying to think. The Persians, right? Alexander, he wanted to pursue the Persians, but the Persian general had been loyal up to that day. Turned around and said, "No, bro, you have to let us deal with the king. This is our fight now. You're king in name only. If you try to assert your authority in Persia," and this is probably why he left and died when he came back. It's now widely accepted that when Alexander returned to Persia, weakened from jungle fever, that he was poisoned and then buried in an undisclosed location as his army had already scattered and was already long left him behind, already thinking he was dead. His so-called Persian wife had no love or loyalty. Zelensky should take the lessons of history that when you're invited to leave with honor. Alexander, you should have done. You should take the lesson from Alexander, and not go on, not press on to your next war, but go home. Okay. And in this case, I know Zelensky's home is actually Russian-occupied territory right now, but they have offered him amnesty, by the way, and protection. If I forget when. I think it was somewhere in 24. I'm not sure if it was Lavrov or Peskov. But recognise the fact that Zelensky may not be able to surrender. I've said this many times that he may not be able to surrender. Not just because some liberal academic says, it's against the Ukrainian constitution. Yeah, you don't have much of a constitution when you're not when emergency powers are only limited, and then you're supposed to hand over power beyond that to the sitting body. No. Zelensky's trying to rule absolute power and get Ukraine used to have him as president. His image is tarnished. He can still salvage this. They are now training women and civilians, as I said yesterday. It's been confirmed. Russia broke the news first that they feared that Zelensky's preparing civilians to basically sacrifice themselves in an effort to create a... this happened in 1917, where the Jewish academics at the Moscow University faced off the Cossacks and was slaughtered, and then the Bolsheviks turned around and used that slaughter to rally the rest of the country against the government, even though probably by all means they weren't peaceful protesters. That history written by the victor rewrote history to suit themselves. Just like the BBC faking news then and now. We see now Zelensky clearly preparing the Ukrainian population to go to the light like lambs to the slaughter to try and provoke a war against Russia. And we see drone damaged building here is one of many. And you can actually see this is not a drone. This is not a drone and missile strike. This is just a drone through the window. It's blowing out the office. And the Ukrainian investigator probably assessing and wondering why this office was hit and what was there. Probably a spotter or a drone controller. Something was either in the office above or below. Probably the office above with no window. Now, Ukraine has begun mass production of interceptor drones. This ain't new technology, folks. Remote control interceptors were first designed and tested in 1944 in Nazi Germany to try and stop American bombers. When America and Russia divvied up German technology, a lot of that did go to Russia and became the SA-6. A lot of people wonder what happened to SA-1 to 5. Well, they were German. But a lot of history books don't record because the Allies agreed to strip the Germans of all their achievements. A lot of their medical achievements were given to Pfizer, believe it or not. Some of their food companies were given to Nestle. You can look this up. There's a lot of accusations of major theft of civilians at the end of World War II who had their achievements stolen from them as well, particularly in Japan. Now, mass production of interceptor drones, this is where I said the British government earlier about the British government. This is the British government's hand in Ukraine. This is the corrupt air defence contracts in play. And that this is the UK government is probably the ones who tipped off the intelligence services in America about the corruption in Ukraine to get rid of the French and Germans, and that's what happened to the IRIS-Ts. That's why there's no IRIS-Ts. Yet they were probably effective or not, and it's probably the other older systems that weren't effective, particularly that they weren't IRIS-Ts. And I also think the Germans never sent the laser. Nobody can confirm that, or any other defences that they... I think there's a lot of claims about air defences and Patriot batteries that we're going to find out that didn't happen. And that's why we don't see them. That's why there's so little footage coming out of Ukraine, which means systemic government corruption and media compliance with systemic government corruption, which means Ukraine is a fascist state. One of the tenets of a fascist state is to control the media and the judiciary. But you do need to be able to fire the judiciary, otherwise you have the other tenet of the fascist state, and that is unelected rule. Unelected bureaucrats ultimately ruling. Now, I reported yesterday that despite the fact that Zelensky claims to not be talking to Russians, here we have Zelensky holding a meeting with senior officials after an attack on Ukraine to organise a release of 1,200 Ukrainians held by Russia, a resumption of exchanges. Why? He needs his senior officers back because they're the only ones who can run the army. He knows his generals are crap. He needs his battlefield commanders back. He knows they're the only competent Ukrainians on the battlefield right now. So, not everything Zelensky does is helping the Russians, because remember, he's not doing it voluntarily. He's not an enemy of the state. He's just incompetent and appointed incompetent and corrupt people around him. But now he's desperately fighting for his life. He needs those competent Ukrainian officers back. Now, like I said, Zelensky, actually that's often spelt with double Y to be Ukrainian, even though it's Russian. Zelensky has pivoted from Germany to Greece. I mean, he's given up on France. France doesn't return his calls. England is been the shadow master here. Greece, why? It's the cheapest gas in Europe. He needs secure gas. And you're going to say, well, where's he getting it for? I said, he was stealing it off the Russians, off the pipelines. Now that they're closed off completely, except for the one that goes to Hungary, but that goes through Belgrade, through Belarus to, apparently. It doesn't go through Ukraine. It's been rerouted through secondary providers. Poland is not happy with this, but nor is Ukraine. But Poland secretly does not want to go to war. Most of the Poles, the Polish Prime Minister, I think, or President, one of the two, is pro-Ukrainian, and the other is, there seems to be problems, and 60% of the government is now against the war, and a lot of the people, they realise that if they go to war with Russia, they're going to be a front line, and half of Poland will be destroyed, and they're not going to rebuild, and they don't want to end up like France or UK. Right now, however, Poland is also profiting off the war. Now, you may not believe this, but a lot of these are not Ukrainian, but they're Polish and Romanian contractors. Again, this is the energy sector corruption. But today, it's possible, but maybe just for the cameras, that they brought in Ukrainian workers and don't have the big contractors on display anymore. Because a lot of Ukrainians are out of work because of the war. But you can see here, this is the thermal power plant. And it is completely gutted by fire. Again. Reuters apparently visited this plant and confirmed that it was completely shut down. That it was being rebuilt at a rapid pace by local contractors. But it's a wreck of twisted metal. Facilities all over have been pounded by Russia. And Ukraine has nowhere near reported every airstrike. Nowhere near that large numbers of Ukraine are devastated by damage. And a lot of it is, down drones, damage whatever they fall on. And a lot of houses in Ukraine are just left as wrecks. Now, the media were allowed to inspect this without being specific, but we all know this is Dnipro, right? This is the Dnipro plant that was hit recently. Was it Dnipro? Where is it? Let's go in. Is it Dnipro? Not Dnipro. Where is it? We go back here. Up here somewhere. Yeah, this up here. Cram. Yeah. That's where it is. Come on, we all know what was hit recently. But the security guarantees, no first names, only first name, no full names. Now, yeah, they're burying a lot of power lines. These were civilian facilities, not built. After a lot of Ukrainian stuff wasn't built the same after 91. They didn't build a lot of sandbagging the control room. Yeah, they brought in outside computers and just pushing stuff to the side. And you can see the design of the plant. Equipment is just bolted to the floor. Nothing is permanently built in. And you can see that most of the building is makeshift roofed over and battered walls of... Now they're using... you ever seen a shopping centre built? Where they basically concrete pour the wall. Well, a lot of them do it in place, but I've seen some where they come in with trucks with the concrete on the flatbed already and they just stand it up and basically concrete them in place. But now Turkey's come out and said what I've said for a long time coming, that I believe as the conflict increases in violence, that Ukraine is getting close to its endpoint, that they are close to breaking. That the future prospects are already taking shape. Turkish Foreign Minister still holds hope that Ukraine will return to the table, that they have proposals that hopefully will be implemented with conditions for a ceasefire ready to be laid out, but will either side accept it? Because remember, both sides, like I said, you give both sides 10 points, Ukraine will pick 5, Russia will pick the other 5. They swap them around, doesn't matter. Ukraine will pick the other 5. It doesn't matter. So no matter what you offer, Zelensky will never accept a deal until he's on his knees. And the look on his face is telling that he does not see a bright future for himself. Now, Strana is reporting on the corruption. This is incredible for a Ukrainian site. Even though it's in Russian, it is a Ukrainian site. It was Russian-owned. It's now Ukrainian-owned. Strana News is owned by the Ukrainian government, allegedly. There's no confirmation on who owns them. But basically, they're asking, is there going to be consequences? Basically, they lay out a case where time and time again, Zelensky gets away with, they get close to something and then, many outlets have the same speech. Okay. Just making sure, because you should be able to find it and translate it in English. Okay. This combat of corruption is living on Western grants. Okay. That the president's mansion, or ex-president's mansion near Kiev, is subject to numerous scandals. So Zelensky and the former president are both being investigated. That this is not new. So this is not solely on Zelensky. This is a long-running problem in Ukraine. These are multiple scandals that they're laying out in energy, in all government contracts, in all sectors. Pretty much just lots of problems in Ukraine. Going back to 2014. One of the reasons why the 2014 coup worked was the allegations of corruption. The problem was, and what they say Ukraine is insinuating but not directly telling us, is that they're admitting that the corrupt took over. That the whole point of 2014, not explicitly saying, just saying things trace back to 2014 and things weren't resolved. No, because the corrupt put their crimes onto others so they can absolve themselves. Now, Zelensky wasn't in power, and he was running against the coup plotters and beat them to become president. Saying they were corrupt, saying they were inept, saying they were the same old tired Ukrainians who would borrow money and never repay it, turning our friends into enemies, and that he would make peace with Russia and end the, he didn't say conflict, he said crisis in eastern Ukraine. And he called for a united Ukraine. Now, he feels that he has to deliver a united Ukraine or he is a failure, and he doesn't want to pay the price of failure. Now, in Ukraine, the price of failure is very high socially, and there's not much of a social circle for corrupt politicians anywhere in the world, but in Ukraine, it's almost a death sentence. Look how many former Ukrainian politicians no longer live in Ukraine. In fact, 9 live in Switzerland. How funny is that? No, actually, they live in Russia. A lot of former Ukrainian, in the last 12 months, have fled. A lot of Ukrainian politicians, former presidents, have fled Ukraine. This is why they knew this was coming. They knew that this was not just a look into Zelensky, but the former president's mansion was raided. Gold deposits, banking, finance, over 115 raids, but only 5 arrests. What does that tell you? That's right. Tells me it's the same thing. A lot of people were let go. That they don't want to rock the boat. They want to just pick a few, line them up, give them a cigarette, and then they die in prison before they get to testify against the boss. But you're telling me that this man had 5 out of 12 friends in the last 12 months all turned out to be corrupt, and all in a corrupt cabal plotting with a unnamed senior government figure who obviously knew he was being taped because he never answered any questions directed at him. and then later reported to Zelensky. Come on. It's Zelensky's aide. It's this guy back here. It's this guy. He's the bagman for Zelensky. He's the one who was in the room with the plotters. He's the one who never spoke. He's the mysterious figure that they cannot pin anything on because nobody's talking. Nobody will point him out. And he's saying, oh, it's all... Though he was searched. But he's saying, it's logical. It's logical, I tell you, that Kremlin is behind it all to keep Ukraine within its sphere of influence. It's extremely unfortunate. You see, these people are obsessed with Eurocash, okay? They were desperate from 91 to 2012. They were on their knees begging Putin not to cut ties with them. This guy was one of them, okay? They were begging Putin for friendship. But Putin was tired of Ukraine's promises and Ukraine trade deals. They were always incomplete. They were worse than they were corrupt. They were always running up debts. When the coup came, Russia cut ties, saying, look, you're blaming us for your own corruption, your own ineptitudes, your own failures. Go ahead, go join Europe, they said, but don't you dare join NATO. And what they do, they immediately turned around and attacked the Russian citizens and then threatened Russia with annihilation. And Russia reminded them that they didn't have any nuclear weapons, that they had been removed already. And then Ukraine tried to acquire a bomb from its former engineers. But most of its former engineers fled with the Russians. And Ukraine was ill-prepared for a civilian backlash from 2014. But they held on thanks to Western backers, and people like this have been protected time and time again from anti-corruption bodies. Though this time he was investigated, he was obviously prepared, because he was right there in the room being told they're coming. And then after listening to the other five talking about how they're going to launder money, he left. They weren't going to listen to him, and he wasn't going to be caught on tape. He got what he needed, recorded them all so that he can, clear himself. But yeah, he obviously, you don't walk into a room with five corrupt people, stand around all day, and they just talk without comfortably, unless they think you're one of them. So obviously he instigated the conversation. He asked them what they were going to do, and as soon as they started yapping, he started recording. He's probably the source of the recording. He probably made sure that he was not on tape. So that even though he'd be searched, he was already prepared. He knew the anti-corruption body was coming, getting close. They already searched others. Everybody knew they were coming from Zelensky. Everybody was reporting on it. On the Russian side, but not on the Ukrainian side. Except for Strata. Most of the Kiev Independent, BBC, French, nobody was reporting it. And see, this is why I bring you both sides. But most people don't want to listen. Most people don't want to know. They want to bury their hand in the sand and say, no. It's only the Republicans who are corrupt. It's only the far right who are corrupt. There is no far right. That is just a left-wing boogeyman to distract you. He's blaming Russia for a $100 million investment scheme involving Ukrainian officials who belong to Zelensky's cabinet. You're saying Putin got them all on the phone and said, hey, sit down, talk in front of this guy, be corrupt, fuck your own country, and then flee to Switzerland. I mean, if they were working for Putin, you think they would flee to Russia? You think Russia intelligence wouldn't have tipped them off? Instead of sitting back and now laughing at their misery? Come on. How can liberals be so insane? to actually believe this guy is squeaky clean. The problem is, logically arguing someone's corrupt ain't going to get you anywhere in a corrupt court system that protects Ukraine and covers up for Ukraine time and time again. They are tipping British intelligence or French intelligence or Ukrainian intelligence or a combination thereof are tipping off Zelensky and keeping him in power. That this guy is the messenger and the bagman. We've seen this before. I live in a state that had systemic corruption and a huge corruption scandal. Everybody knew who the corrupt politicians were. The police could never catch anybody until one day the bagman got sick, and then everybody just got sick, and then everybody discovered he was pilfering from the pot kitty. And then a bunch of up-and-coming politicians decided to use public outrage to basically stage a palace coup. And lo and behold, a corrupt government was brought down. And this is what's going to happen in Ukraine. This is what's going to happen in England. Sooner or later, a Labour Party backbencher in Ukraine, the same thing, one of Zelensky's own, is going to swing to the back and just lay it all out. And there'll be a huge inquiry, and lines of people will come out of the woodwork and tell everything they know, because once the immunity for prosecutions are handed out, and I've seen this before, I come from a state that had a lot of corruption and saw hundreds of arrests when people finally got off their high horse, stopped playing politics, because trust me, when it comes to corruption, it's public officials, it's union officials, it's ministers, it's opposition members, it's party organisers. It is not just a handful of people, particularly in a $100 million embezzlement scheme. And you know what? I think all in all, back 40 odd years ago now in Queensland, I think it was only a $10 million embezzlement scheme. And this was mostly kickbacks for state enterprises. A lot of these, awarding dam contracts and stuff like that. It's always government contracts, and it's just the same thing. It's a logical echo of the past. That corruption is most where government money is transferred to the private sector. Trust me, the Shawshank Redemption may feel true. It's not true, but it feels true, because that's exactly how it goes. You get an official in a position of power. He walks up to the contractor, bold-faced lie, just says, put some cash in. And I've heard, now I don't know if this is true or not, but in Ukraine, some of these officials have demanded women, bottles of alcohol, weapons. One had a gold Kalashnikov handed to them. There was a Ukrainian official who was killed under mysterious circumstances by a hand grenade in the mail. Come on. Nobody gets a hand grenade through the mail. Okay, the modern era, obviously, it was hand-delivered by an expert from the intelligence services so that Zelensky could shake up command without shaking up command. That's a purge without telling us they're having a purge. Now, I think this is the same thing. I think Zelensky's facing a purge, a challenge to his power, and if enough come forward and sink Mikhail Podolyak here, he will squeal like a pig and name Zelensky in a heartbeat. Look at that guy. Look at that pose. You think he's going to take it in the arse in prison? You think he's going to go down for Zelensky? You think the man who probably only gets $100,000 a year is going to give up Zelensky, is going to go to jail for Zelensky and let him walk away with millions of dollars? Maybe this guy's stolen millions and would take that immunity from prosecution. But of course, if you look up the Fitzgerald report, some of those who did take money and then later took immunity from prosecution found out they did have to give up their corrupt money. So there is always that possibility he's holding out, hoping that he won't get named in a European court of. But see, this is the thing: if once they join NATO, or they're not going to be immune. In fact, it makes it easier for Europe to prosecute them for their past crimes. Though that's why they want to join NATO under their terms. Because when they join NATO, they want their golden ticket, don't they? They want their get-out-of-jail-free card. That's why Zelensky wants that appointment to NATO as Captain Sky Shield. I'm not letting that one go. But people don't want to know this. But if you want to know why Ukraine is in a bad position, it is Zelensky. It's not so much that Russia is successful. It's that Ukraine is run by dullards who are running it into the ground. Trust me, 100 million? That's a lot of air defense. Okay? Because they were getting lots of equipment from Germany, lots of equipment from France in the early days. Had they had sophisticated air defenses in place sooner and not embezzled all this money, and this is only recently, imagine how much they've been embezzling for the last 10 years. I'm not talking about Zelensky, I'm just saying they as a whole. These people have been in power for so long now. This is, again, going back to my own situation, growing up, hearing about systemic corruption and seeing the trials, that this didn't start with one man. It started with a whole one man taking over a corrupt system and then letting the corruption fester and taking advantage of the corruption and allowing the corruption to go from a handful of police taking money for illegal casinos to everybody on state payroll putting, 100 envelopes, bags of cash, or whatever, brown bagging cash in Christmas cakes and, double donating. They'll give $100 to the party and $100 to direct into the cash hands of the politician. Now, this is obviously not the only country that's had that problem, and why a lot of countries are trying to do away with cash and large cash transactions. But Ukraine, you look at Joe Biden, billions in cash on pallets. You're telling me Ukraine is underdefended when they've gotten billions for air defenses? This 100 million is just the beginning. I'm sorry if you don't like bad news. I know a lot of people probably don't want to know the truth. But the truth will set you free. The truth will probably save Ukraine. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Please support the channel. You can support the channel on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you. I really appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video. Bye for now.